Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions. The mystery of the Kensington Runestone. Did Norse explorers reach Minnesota in 1362? Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction. Not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. In the autumn of 1898, a Swedish immigrant farmer named Olof Oman was clearing land near Kensington, Minnesota, when his plow struck a flat stone slab entangled in the roots of a tree. The stone was covered in writing no one in the county could read. When linguists examined it, they found runic script, the alphabet of medieval Scandinavia, describing a party of Norse explorers who had reached the heart of North America in 1362 and found 10 of their companions dead and red with blood. The inscription, if genuine, would push confirmed European contact with the interior of North America back by 130 years before Columbus, and 500 miles deeper into the continent than any accepted Norse presence. It would require a complete revision of pre-Columbian American history. Most academic linguists and rhinologists have dismissed it as a 19th century forgery, probably by Oman himself. But a forensic geologist, a linguist, and a growing body of researchers have argued the dismissal was premature, that the evidence for authenticity is stronger than the academic consensus admits. The Kensington Runestone has been called both the greatest archaeological hoax in American history and the most important artifact ever found on American soil. After 125 years, neither side has definitively won. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the global puzzle of unexplained ancient construction, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. Archaeology is, by its nature, an incomplete science. We find only what survives, and what survives is determined not by importance, but by durability. Stone lasts, wood rots, metal corrodes, ceramics endure. The written word survives only if it is inscribed on stone or baked clay. Papyrus and vellum are hostages to humidity and fire. This means that every picture of the past, assembled from archaeological evidence, is a distortion, biased toward the materials that happen to last, rather than the activities that define the culture. With that cave in place, the structures that do survive from the ancient world are sometimes inexplicable by any conventional model of the societies that built them. We find stone blocks weighing hundreds of tons, fitted together with tolerances measured in millimeters, transported from quarries dozens of kilometers away, and raised to heights that challenge modern cranes. We find astronomical alignments so precise that they track the movements of specific stars over periods of thousands of years. We find architectural proportions that embed mathematical ratios, pi, phi, the Pythagorean theorem, in civilizations that supposedly had no formal mathematics. The challenge these structures pose is not engineering alone. It is conceptual. How did people without our tools conceive of projects on this scale? How did they solve the organizational problems of feeding and coordinating tens of thousands of workers over decades? How did they transmit technical knowledge across generations without standardized notation? The buildings stand as proof that they did it. The question of how remains genuinely open. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades, and patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding the Kensington Runestone. Did Norse explorers reach Minnesota in 1362? Is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. Olaf Oman discovered the stone on November 8, 1898, near Kensington, Minnesota, entangled in the roots of a poplar tree he estimated at 40 years old. The stone is a flat slab of gray wacke, a dense sandstone measuring 92 centimeters tall and weighing approximately 90 kilograms. The runic inscription covers the face and one side, recording a date of 1362 and describing a party of Norsemen on a journey of discovery through the American interior. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen. Instruments malfunction. Researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered the inscription describes a party of 8 Goths and 22 Norwegians, possibly a reference to a mixed Swedish-Norwegian expedition on an exploration journey from Vinland. The text states that 10 men were found dead and red with blood, and dead after the party returned from fishing. The survivors built a camp by 14 islands, interpreted as the Lake District of Minnesota, and asked God to protect them. The date given in the inscription is 1362. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this. And that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine. The Smithsonian Institution examined the runestone in 1948-1949 and concluded it was a 19th century forgery, citing anachronistic runic forms and medieval Swedish dialect features supposedly unknown until modern scholarship. This remains the official mainstream academic position held by most Scandinavian runologists. The stone is now displayed at the Runestone Museum in Alexandria, Minnesota, which draws tens of thousands of visitors annually and is the town's primary economic attraction. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation. But the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, forensic geologist Scott Wolter examined the stone in 2000 and argued that weathering and calcite deposits in the runic cuts indicated the inscription was made centuries before 1898, not decades. Wolter published his findings and became the stone's most prominent scientific advocate, subsequently hosting the television series America Unearthed. Some geologists have accepted his weathering argument. Others dispute that limestone weathering can be dated with the precision he claimed. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of linguist Richard Nielsen initially supported the forgery hypothesis, but reversed his position after researching medieval Swedish church documents. He identified the dotted R character in the inscription, a symbol absent from all published runic alphabets available in the 19th century, but present in obscure 14th century Swedish ecclesiastical manuscripts that Oman could not plausibly have accessed in rural Minnesota in 1898. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding. Olof Oman had a subscription to a Swedish-American periodical that had published articles discussing runic inscriptions, which mainstream scholars cite as a potential source for a sophisticated forger. However, the specific dotted R and AVM symbols, crossed with circles, found in the inscription appear in 14th century Swedish Masonic and church documents that were not published or widely accessible until the 20th century, a detail the forgery hypothesis has never fully explained. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations, and in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the Kensington Runestone. Did Norse explorers reach Minnesota in 1362? This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that the runestone is a genuine medieval artifact left by a Norse or Scandinavian expedition that reached Minnesota in 1362. Consistent with documented Scandinavian exploration of North America in the centuries. After Leif Erikson, advocates Scott Wolter, Richard Nielsen, and others cite the geological weathering evidence, the presence of obscure medieval runic characters, and contextual historical evidence for 14th century transatlantic contact as collectively making authenticity plausible. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that Oman forged the inscription using a 19th century Swedish dialect primer and knowledge of runes gleaned from periodical articles. The mainstream academic consensus, supported by most Scandinavian runologists and T.H.E. Smithsonian, the linguistic features cited as evidence of medieval authenticity are, on this view, explicable by sources available to a literate Swedish immigrant. The stone's convenient discovery after European settlement is considered highly suspicious. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that the inscription is a genuine copy or transcription of an earlier medieval text whose original is lost, possibly made by a 19th century Scandinavian immigrant who encountered or possessed an earlier record and carved it into stone. This minority hypothesis attempts to reconcile the medieval linguistic features with the 19th century discovery context, but has attracted few serious supporters from either camp in the ongoing debate. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the Kensington Runestone. Did Norse explorers reach Minnesota in 1362? Does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes the dotted R character in the inscription was not present in any published runic alphabet or reference work available in 19th century America. Richard Nielsen identified it in Swedish medieval church documents that were neither translated nor widely circulated until well into the 20th century. If this character identification is correct, Oman could not have known to include it, making the forgery hypothesis significantly harder to sustain than the mainstream consensus has acknowledged. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented AVM symbols, a stylized cross with circular elements, appear in the inscription and closely match symbols found in 14th century Swedish Masonic and ecclesiastical documents. These documents were identified by researchers decades after the stone's discovery. Scott Wolter's geological weathering analysis, while contested, found calcite deposits in the runic cuts consistent with centuries of weathering rather than the decades that would have elapsed since a 1898 forgery. No definitive dating method can establish the inscription's age conclusively. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed carbon-14 dating cannot date stone, only organic material. Thermoluminescence dating was attempted on clay particles attached to the stone. Results were ambiguous. The tree whose roots encased the stone was estimated at 40 years old in 1898, meaning it germinated around 1858, consistent with the stone being placed before European settlement of the area, but not inconsistent with a forgery either, as the estimate was info. RML, the debate remains genuinely unresolved after 125 years of investigation. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the Kensington Runestone. Did Norse explorers reach Minnesota in 1362? Now, we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. No definitive resolution has been reached. Scott Wolter's television series America Unearthed has kept the authenticity case in public view. Mainstream Scandinavian runologists remain skeptical. Recent linguistic analyses continue on both sides. The Runestone Museum in Alexandria, Minnesota displays the stone as their centerpiece exhibit, drawing visitors who would not otherwise come to Western Minnesota. If the stone is authentic, it requires rewriting pre-Columbian American history and confirming European penetration to the continental interior 130 years before Columbus. If it is a forgery, it is an extraordinarily sophisticated one whose creator somehow incorporated obscure medieval runic details unknown to 19th century scholarship. The mystery is genuine, the stakes are high, and the evidence cuts both ways. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the Kensington Runestone. Did Norse explorers reach Minnesota in 1362? From the historical record, through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Kensington Runestone ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.